Thank you, and welcome everyone to this month's Connect with Remedy webinar series. This month we will be covering BMC Service Resolution version 3.501. And today, Darius Wallace, an R&D Solutions Architect, is going to take us through this content. And I will just say, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A pod for any questions you have. These questions will be answered by our panelists or at the end by Darius himself. Darius, please proceed.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Hi, I'm Darius Wallace. I'm part of BMC in the R&D solution in the R&D organization as a solution architect. And here we're going to go over a discussion about the features and capabilities of Service Resolution version 3.501. We'll do a brief background of some of the things that have evolved in what was previously referred to as intelligent ticketing, just to set a baseline for those who have that background and to level set everyone else who are coming into it new. But more specifically, we're going to talk about the net new features of 3.501 and how you can take advantage of it for building on what you have, or maybe use it as a reason to move to the latest release and the new architecture. So with that being said, let me go ahead and kind of give you a high level, which is, as we said, we're going to do the quick discussion of the evolution of BSR as it started from the intelligent ticketing, simple interaction of event creating a ticket, to what it is today. Focus on what's new. We'll put out a bunch of references and we'll have QA at the end. As Greg pointed out, if I'm in a particular section and there is a question, please leverage the chat to pose the question. And if it comes through, Greg will pull that question forward and we may take it live, or we will queue it up and address the question at the end. So please feel free to leverage the Q&A panel in order to get your questions queued up during the session. If, in fact, it's something that you want to formulate later, please make note of the slide that we're on, because there's pictures in here, and sometimes questions come up in reference to pictures, and it would be helpful for me to get back to that slide quickly so that I can answer the question in the context of that slide. All right, enough of the logistics. Let's get into the heart of this. So first and foremost, let's give a little bit of background. Again, this next 5 minutes may bore some of you because you're already sitting on a version and made the move over to the architecture and have seen this evolution or participated in the evolution. But just to make sure everybody's on the same page that are coming into this net new, well, we first started off with intelligent ticketing. It's not a new concept. It's been around for quite a while. The basic principles were being able to take an event and create a ticket. And frankly, even today, that's the extent of what most people, or a lot of people are doing. I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people are doing, a lot of customers are doing. But, you know, way back in the day when we first introduced this, our first goal was to kind of extend and expand the concept of just turning an event into an incident. So we started with server-centric policies. We talked about some default mappings that were put in place. We expanded the concept of what bidirectional communication was about. Rather than just have something be referred to as, hey, I had an event, I created an incident, and as a result of that, I got back an incident ID. That could qualify as bidirectional. However, what we look to do is to acknowledge the fact that events are the starting point in the event management system. They result in an incident. The incident goes through a life cycle, and the event scenario also continues during this process. What we're looking at when we talk about bidirectional communication is that while both of those processes continue forward to ultimately resolve the problem, that as the incident goes through its life cycle, updates are made available back to the event management process. And if there's updates that occur about the severity of that event, or maybe even the resolution of that event, that update is also reflected in the incident side of the fence. So when we talk about bidirectional, we're not just talking about the initial event to incident creation. We're talking about those processes continuing forward and supporting the bidirectional collaboration between the event management process and the incident management process. We've also introduced way back then the hierarchical consideration for impacted incidents. So rather than just create for an event, you have a causal event or a causal CI that was impacted, then you end up creating a single incident. we introduced the idea of having hierarchy where you can also create what's referred to as impact incidents that are automatically related to the causal incident. And then we had put in place the bidirectional cross loss. Now, there was a window of time that that capability was maintained. Many of you know that as the framework for IBRSD. And that was what was used, and that was maintained for a while. In about 2013, we put some energy around revisiting this solution, and we had an idea at that very beginning stage to elevate intelligent ticketing up to the broader capability of service resolution, where we take in more information, we enrich the capability between the event management system and the incident so that it can fulfill the more relevant downstream capability of solving the issue, right? So, but in that first release, the 2.0 formal release we put forth for our investment over the next several releases, we just wanted to focus on stabilizing some of the issues that had queued up. But we did also introduce net new features. We, like I said, focused on addressing the long-standing issues. There were some gaps in functionality. There were some things that people were doing in the original intelligent ticketing because they had to. It didn't. The product out of the box didn't provide the capability, as an example, to take operational categories as information that would get passed over into the incident management system so that they could facilitate routing. So what customers had to do, one of the most common ones, was to go in and customize the staging form and make sure those variables were there, put in workflow to map those variables into the base form, and then on the event management side, fill those slots accordingly. So that was a common capability. Well, we put in capability that makes that available out of the box. Well, all you have to do is establish what the slots are, and those slots are automatically or already available, and information will just flow through those slots over to the incident side. We also did a shift in paradigm in how you look at this end to end. As I said before, we went straight from just being an event to incident creation to a more holistic view of what happens in the bidirectional communication, and introduced new terminology that understands and calls out level 1, level 2, and level 3. Each of those levels are talked about. We have material, content, and even videos now that explain or highlight the different levels of capability that you can evolve through. And then one of the key things that was most important was to start the process of introducing the top-down solution level documentation. Rather than have to be an expert on TrueSight and then have to also be an expert on incident management or bring two resources together, and then collaboration would be in place in order to make this solution work, and you had to look at two sets of docs. We introduced solution level documents focused on service resolution. Now, the most notable release after we had established the stabilization was to get over to the architectural shift. We have a documentation as well as even some video that shows the difference in the architecture. This actually proves to be the most notable thing for customers to consider. Even going from 1.0 to 2.0, but more specifically going from the 2.0 to the new architecture, is reconciling the customizations that customers had done before in order to make sure that it worked the way they needed to, and reconcile that with the fact that those customizations, in some cases, in many cases, are now available out of the box. So how do you deprecate your customizations and start leveraging the out-of-the-box approach to solving that problem? But also with this architecture, it enabled us to be in a position to more formally support the SaaS environment, where you don't need to leverage, have VPN tunnels in order to interact from an on-premise instance of TrueSight, or if it's BPPM, with a Remedy on Demand version of ITSM. And we also expanded it to include the basic capability for level 1 capability for Remedy Force. We also expanded the routing options. We included additional capabilities. We'll talk through each of those. Because we went to the new architecture, we increased the throughput for the number of events that can go through the system, which pretty much negated the need for customers to have to spin up multiple instances of IBRSD and instead adjust the threads that the integration gateway was using in order to interact with the service desk. We put in place a one-click test capability so that you're not reverse engineering and have to become an expert on the internals. That was our first step there. In the release that we'll be talking about, we even expanded upon that, and we'll show you a bit more. And then we also focused on simplifying the installation. So when you add all of this up and you put it all together, I've kind of talked through these things, but more specifics could go a long way. So we looked at this redesign and the scalability to allow for the multi-threaded approach. We also switched to web services. And then we introduced a service-oriented interface in order to facilitate how the event management system interacts with the service desk. Now, because of this shift in that architecture, this now opened the door up for not just TrueSight creating tickets, but it also opened the door for other event monitoring systems to create tickets directly through this new service-oriented interface in a more simplified fashion. We addressed resilience. There's a case that if you were leveraging the legacy interface that was made available for incident management, it basically did create, update, and delete operations. And you had to transactionally understand what sequence of things to do in order to effectively create an incident. And if you got something wrong, the system would fail. It would block your creation. What we've done with the new interface is we put in place resilience such that as you pass information in, if it's not what we expect, we put it into the work log, and we continue forward with creating the incident. In fact, we've gone to the point of minimizing that an incident can be created by just passing summary information. Everything else is either defaulted or derived so that you at least get the ticket created. So there's resilience built into the interface as a part of this new architecture and the direction and the path that we're on. As I mentioned before, we expanded it to allow for support for other sources. We took our ITDA solution and passed information through this channel, and again, provide support for third-party event management systems. We already have some interactions that we're working with third-party vendors who are leveraging this new interface. In fact, they had built it against the legacy interface, and then they started using this new interface, which tremendously simplified their go-to-market and their ability to get their out-of-the-box capability working to generate incidents in the incident management system. But what that also supports is the fact that at customer sites, if you find that there's some other mechanism by which you want to generate an incident based upon an event, whatever that may be, this interface provides a more straightforward way to do that. As we talked about for the SaaS environment, we provided that capability. Incident proliferation and dealing with event consolidation. This is a case where every time an event comes in, you end up spinning up a new incident. Well, that's great that an incident gets created, but we already know that on the customer side, that proves to be quite a problem because incident management is not designed or not structured or not intended to be the baseline for every time an event you create an incident. The first order object in the service desk is the incident, and what you want to do is as you get more information about a CI, you would look to consolidate that information or have that information reflected in the same incident that's already open, as opposed to every time there's an event, you always create an incident. So we provided options for customers to leverage that. We also supported the idea, introduced the ability of incident governance. This allows for you to deal with the case where if the event creates the incident, you're able to configure the system so that if no one touches the incident, then the event will be responsible for governing the life cycle of that incident. And if no one touches the incident on the service desk side and the event gets resolved, then it will automatically close the incident. However, if you enable this feature, it avoids the situation that I, as the service desk agent, have been working on the incident, and in fact, I've expanded the scope of the incident because the event was just a catalyst for something much bigger. And now I've expanded the scope of that incident to include that CI plus some other issues. Well, you don't then, in that case, want the event to say that one event to get resolved and then ultimately snatch the incident from underneath me and move it to a resolved state because it was more than just that one event because I've expanded the scope. So there's an option there for you to put in controls to prevent that from happening. And then support updates. So when that stuff comes from the event, when that data comes from the event, it just becomes an update into the work log. We did some things with queue management to make it easier to find items. We added a few more policies. And as we talked about, we expanded the routing capability so that you can now route based upon resolution and product categories. You can route based upon operational categories. You can route based on CI location, and the definitions that are established inside of incident management, you can route based upon supported by and managed by. And as we talked about before, we have bidirectional communication, one-click validation, and solution-level documentation. So these are all the things that we have made available as a part of our evolution from the 1.0 to 2.0 and ultimately to switch to the architecture. And what we're going to now do is focus on the items around 3.5. So with 3.5, a variety of things have been put in place. We've expanded upon some concepts. One that's not listed here, but we'll see it in our first review, is we've expanded upon the ability for one-click tests to do even more checkpoints, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We introduced the idea for supporting supporting outages. We acknowledge that the event management system is the system of record for when a CI is up or down, and that results in an outage. The goal would be is that when that occurs, we would like that to be reflected in the asset system in the service desk as a unavailability record, an unplanned unavailability record, and being able to manage, define, and configure when that occurs for the causal as well as the impacted CI. So we'll talk more about that feature, which is the main feature of 3.5, but we'll do that one toward the end. We provided some additional capability for incident consolidation. We added some additional capability for facilitating or in some cases negating the need to customize the system by leveraging temporary slots that map information all the way through the system, as well as providing predefined slots for assignment in the event that the event management system is the one making the decision as to what group and individual the incident should be assigned to. As we talked about, that service-oriented interface allowed us to leverage other solutions, have other solutions create events in the incident management system. Out of the box, our mainframe solution now leverages this interface as their primary interface for creating incidents in our service desk solution via this new interface. And as we talked about, continue to support and work with other third-party products, monitoring products, to facilitate their ability out of the box to integrate leveraging this new architecture and this new interface. So the key thing here that we want to talk about, and when we start off with one of the key features, is one-click validation. What we've done here is we've expanded the capability of one-click validation. The one-click validation allows us now to do more than what it did before. Before we checked on certain touch points, and then we did an end-to-end test. Well, we've expanded on that in 3.5. We look at certificates to make sure that the certificates are where they should be. We check on the mid-tier access. We put in support for whether or not the outage structures are in place. And we check on the flow of information from TrueSight or BPPM all the way through to the service desk. So we put in place more robust capability. This is not only for the benefit of our customer support organization, but it's actually targeted for customers to take an approach of trying to identify when something is not working, because things change all the time. So I don't know if this got, oh, that's not good. Okay, so there was a media file that we had here that the system did not upload and is not visible here. So we are going to, on the fly, not worry about showing that media file. I'll just focus on the concept, and if time permits at the end, we'll switch over to an interactive mode, and I'll show it on my desktop for you guys to see it. But the net of it is that it allows you to go in and press a button, which is thus the term of one-click validation, one-click test. You press this one button, and it does a system sanity check to say, hey, are all the components in place? Can I talk to everything I need to? And if it can't, the benefit of this is that it isolates where that failure is so that you can then work on solving that particular problem and then move on. We've got a lot of the things that we've enriched in this area based upon feedback from customers when we put the solution out there, things that they've tried, and we had to work with them to figure out why the password on the server that AR is running on has a password on it that we don't know anything about. So we can check that to know that you can't get access to the server. You can get access to AR, but you can't even get past the server. So we put in checks to make sure that we know and isolate the problem, because in this kind of solution, you know what happens. all you care about is the fact that I had an event and I didn't get a ticket. Well, if you didn't get a ticket, there's all kinds of touch points along the way where something may have gone wrong. This helps you to isolate and identify the problem and then troubleshoot via the appropriate logs to figure out where the failure was at the time, through the one-click test, as opposed to trying to reverse engineer it from the solution side. We also made a move forward on one of the common things that were done before. Although our best practice indicates that assignment is a function of incident management, we expect that the groups, the users are defined, and the support groups that are defined are in the service desk side. So when an event comes up and what group it goes to, there are definitions and references available to figure out who I should assign this incident to, and that's governed by the by the service desk organization, which is dynamic and may change. But there are cases, and I call this out as the exception and the allowance for the exception. I would say it's not the steady state. Please don't do this for all of your events. But there are cases where, in fact, what group it goes to depends upon the information in the event. And that information that's in the event is not available on the service desk side to make a decision as to what group to route this to. So in that case, the event management system, in these exceptions, wants to hard code or define or derive what group that the ticket should be assigned to. So in that case, we provided the slots that will allow you to simply populate those assignment fields, and it will then create the ticket with the assignments that you've established, as opposed to you having to customize the system and put these slots in and all that great stuff. We've established or allowed for the fact that, hey, there are cases where you need to pass that information from the event management system, and you leverage these connections to update the slots so that everything gets mapped as you would expect. Again, this is a high-level view. There's details and documentations around how to configure each of these if these prove to be of interest to you. We've also gone further in looking at supporting the flow of information. On the previous release, 3.0 release, we supported and expanded the fact that when you create a ticket, or excuse me, when you have an event and you're creating an incident, one of the things is that we can't anticipate everything that you would need to see. We think we have the basic things covered. In fact, we think we have most of the things covered, but there's always something that new in the customer's environment where they need to pass something out of the event system that they want to restore, maybe in a custom field on the service desk side. So in the 3.0, the previous release, we supported the flow of information, and we put in 10 predefined slots. Those 10 predefined slots are available for TrueSight to leverage, or for any external product to pass information into the system, and they map to 10 predefined slots on the incident side. So you would be able to put information in these fields and then pass that information through that pipe. Now, that was on the inbound. With 3.5, we wanted to also support the outbound. We also wanted to support the fact that on the on the event management side in TrueSight, there is what's referred to as an info record. We have found and got feedback from customers that sometimes they expand that info record because they want additional things out of the incident reflected in the info record so that the TrueSight agent can see within their own tool some additional updates that goes along with that bidirectional communication we talked about. So in that case, what we've done is we've created 10 predefined temporary slots that are available on the info record, on the incident info record on the TrueSight side. And those slots are known in the outbound staging form. The only thing we don't know, and we have to leave to you to work on or to put together, is which fields off the service desk ticket do you want to map to those temporary fields. So you would then say, okay, here are the 10 slots, temp 1 through 10, but you got to let us know which field on the service desk or ticket that you want to flow in when that trigger occurs to do an update. And so, but you have the ability to do that, and we have a white paper which has a URL we'll point to. It's in our solution documentation to say go to this specific filter and do your mapping off the service desk field, off the incident ticket. Take the fields you want and map them to temp 1 through 10, whichever ones you feel you need. And when you do that, that information will automatically show up in the temp fields that are represented on the info record on the event management side on TrueSight. So we put those things in out of the box. Again, this is with the intent of trying to facilitate and minimize the need for doing customizations when you determine, hey, I need more information to flow through the system. So it could be that information comes from TrueSight. There's some additional fields, and you flow that all the way through to specific fields on the service desk. But there's a different set of fields that as the incident goes through its life cycle, you want those fields to come back and get reflected on the info record on the TrueSight side. So those channels, those pipes, are there for you to leverage as a part of it, as opposed to needing to open the system and do customizations. Another area we talked about is the incident consolidation. This is dealing with the case that legacy implementation led to the fact that if you're using two different policies, there's a global policy that says if there's a failure on any incident in the system, go off and create a ticket based upon the conditions you specify. But we also have policies that support a model which supports the causal and impact scenario. Well, if you're using both of those policies in the legacy system, what would happen is that the global policy would say, hey, there's a problem on CI 123. And because I'm the global policy, any event that happens on CI 123 that satisfies this condition generated an incident. But you also had the other policy, which was the global policy that says, hey, if there's a problem on CI 123, I want to create an incident and refer to that incident as a causal incident, and then I will know the impact upstream, and I will create an incident for that as well. Well, it turns out that you now have theoretically two incidents that are created for the same CI. So you have one event, and there's a causal incident, and then there's an infrastructure incident, because you have two policies that are overlapping with each other, and they're related. You know, when they get in the system, you'll link them together, but nonetheless, you still have two incidents that are showing up in the system in the legacy approach. We've enabled a feature that allows you to do incident consolidation. When you turn this consolidation incident flag on and you have both of these policies running, what happens is the system detects the fact that you're talking about the same CI. And as a result, it looks at those and consolidates them into a single causal incident. And the information is reconciled. And so whatever was in infrastructure incident 1, that information is reflected as a part of the causal incident. So it becomes the parent incident. Okay, so now you don't have to deal with two incidents for a single event. You turn this feature on and it will consolidate your incidents so that you're working in your queue against that one incident. Okay, now here's where we come to the main feature that was a focus for the 3.5 release. We're going to go a little bit deeper here because there's concepts that are introduced, and we want to make sure those concepts are understood in addition to the architecture and the capability that support it. This is all about support for outage synchronization. When there is a failure that occurs in the system of record for us, which we consider the event management system, it knows when a system goes down. And what we want to do is coordinate that event of when it goes down with creating the corresponding unavailability record in the service desk side on the asset as a part of the asset definition. So some key things to keep in mind. We would want to create these items, and we would also want to understand their relationship to other things in the ITSM system. So in fact, if there's an incident and the outage comes out and an incident got created, we want to have those things tied together. So before we go into those details, let's acknowledge a few things. We have a new interface, or with the 3.5 interface, that supports the flow of information that goes into an interface form for supporting the unavailability record creation, and that gets represented where you would expect. The key leverage point for this, the key use case, the key leverage point for this for those who are doing service level management, this now allows you to get more accurate and make it feasible to do accurate service level management when you're trying to determine your true unavailability around a CI or for certain incidents. Okay, so let's see how this works. Now, what we call out is, in order to do this, we leverage the policy construct just as we do with an incident. One thing I want to be very clear about. An outage is different from an incident. Now, many of you are nodding your head like, yeah, duh, that's kind of obvious. But it's not as obvious to others who are trying to figure out how to make this work. Sometimes there's the assumption made that says whenever there's an outage, I will always create an incident, so therefore, when the incident occurs, then have the incident be responsible for creating the unavailability record. Well, that's not true. You have many incidents that have nothing to do with an outage of a CI. All kinds of incidents can get created and have nothing to do with the CI. And at the same time, there could in fact be an outage that does not result in creating an incident. The case for that is that if I have a maintenance window for a CI that is going to be down from a known window of time, a known and planned outage from 12 midnight to 5 a.m., then whenever I bring that CI down within that window, I do not want an incident for that. I don't want to be creating incidents for somebody to get up, go fix, and find out why the CI went down when in fact I had planned for it to go down. So this is a classic example of where there is in fact an outage. Doesn't matter if it was justified, not justified. The fact is the system detects that the thing went down, independent of whether I intended it to go down or whether it went down in an unexpected manner. The fact is that it's down. So you would record an outage for that. But in fact, it was done within a maintenance window, which means I don't need to open up an incident for it. But I still want to record the fact that an outage occurred so I know when that thing was up and down, and I can reconcile if it was done within a maintenance window or whether I want to count it as an unplanned outage later. We'll talk about that in those scenarios in a bit. But the key thing here is you establish a policy, and you have two options for the policy. We're going to show an example of the more comprehensive policy where you say that I want to have an outage created for both the impacted CI as well as the causal. So once you associate the policy with a higher level CI, in this case, the business service, that narrows your scope and covers the range of items that are covered and addressed by that outage policy. So if, in fact, you have a failure that occurs at the lower level of the tree, you would then guess how many outage records you would get. With this policy, you will end up with exactly 2 outage records. The first outage record will be for the causal CI, and the second outage record will be for the impacted CI. So you'll end up with 2 outage records. Okay? So if there's an outage or an error that occurs in host 1, you'll end up, and you're using this policy, you'll end up with an outage record for host 1 as well as an outage record for the business service. You also have the ability to set the secondary policy, which is I only want the outage record for the impacted service that I associate the policy to. So in fact, if the causal goes down, I don't create an outage record for it because I'm really focused on understanding the outage for the impacted item. Okay, and so you'll create just an outage for that impacted. That's the second policy that's available. Okay, now let's set the stage for the primary use cases. I talked about service level management being one of the primary consumers or benefactors of having an efficient representation of your outages. If we go back to this base screen, we also look at the fact that asset management is a source for being able to understand outages as part of the asset management process and also when you're doing service management. The primary roles that are involved in looking at coordinating outages is, from the starting point, always with the event manager. This is what they live and breathe. When something goes down, they have the ability to see and view that relationship of what happens when something goes down. They see the causal and they see the upstream impacted service. From an asset management standpoint, in the service desk side, this is the legacy screen. Please don't interpret this as what's being represented in Smart IT and the new GUI, but we wanted to just bring up the fact that when you see a CI and you're doing asset management, you'll notice that there's a record that reflects the fact that there is for that CI, that there is an unavailability record that has been created. And then the same can be also represented that if in fact an incident is created, as a part of that incident, you would like for that outage record to be associated with that incident so that you understand that there is an outage. Before, without having this integration and this automation, what would happen is that you have an outage, which would be only reflected on the incident side, on the event management side, and then the person who would get the ticket would work the ticket, and they would be responsible for also creating an outage record if they had time to do so. And also keep in mind, they would be guessing or coming up with their estimate of when the outage actually started and when it actually ended. This automation establishes the actual start time for the outage and the actual end time for that outage that was recorded. So let's just take a look at a few scenarios that tie around an outage. this use case is just an example, but it sets the stage for understanding the benefit of having an unplanned outage coordinated with a planned unavailability. So in this use case, we have a planned outage that was scheduled for CI from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. So this is when we had planned to take the CI down to do some work on it. So that's a known window of time. And what happens is 1 hour prior to that, at 1 p.m., that CI actually goes down. And then it turns out that, it comes into the window and somebody fixes the problem and the CI comes back up, or they do something such that the CI comes back up again within the planned window. There's all kinds of use cases for why and this may occur. It may have been that the person started the process early. It may have been, coincidentally, something happened right an hour before the window happened and the CI went down. But keep in mind, our planned unavailability window is used to communicate to customers so we can set their expectations. On the flip side, on the event management side, it does not care when we talk about outages about whether it's planned or unplanned. It could care less. All it's doing is saying the CI went down and now the CI is back up. And as a result of that, it will produce our unavailability record. Now what you're able to do here is then go back and reconcile that what is my true unplanned unavailability. Well, in this particular case, it only results in a 1 hour window because there was an expectation set with customers that after 2 o'clock, this thing was expected to be down anyway. So that expectation has been met, but 1 hour prior to that, the thing went down and was not planned. And that's the exposure that you want to capture as far as whether you're meeting the customer expectations. Okay. If we take another scenario, similar situations, not rocket science, but it could be that for whatever reason, the person either started early or coincidentally, this item went down and had a major failure. Fortunately, it was an hour before we were planning on working on it anyway. Not only did it take us all of the time to get it back up and running, but we ran out of time during the maintenance window, and even an hour after that it took before it came up. Well, the entire time that the outage occurred was 6 hours. But when you reconcile it with the planned unavailability, the outage and the missed expectation with the customer was actually 2 hours because of that overlap. And finally is the one that we talked about before. This is the case where, hey, I planned to take it down. And guess what? During that window, I did take the CI down. The event management system says, yeah, I don't care why you did it and when it should have gone down, but it went down. So I record that. And then when it comes back up, I will record when it comes back up. And as a result, in this case, the actual outage fell within the window of the expectations that we've set for the customer, in which case the net unplanned actual unavailability from a service level management standpoint is 0. There is no outage because it was done within the window for which we've already planned and set expectations with the customer. Okay? Now these are oversimplified use cases, but we wanted to make sure that folks understood that when we've done unavailability, a couple of key principles to walk away with. Number one, an outage is different than an incident, and we try and manage it as such. Now we will say that they're related, but an outage will occur, and an outage is an outage is an outage. It is not necessarily an incident. And therefore, when this gets created, if in fact an incident is created, there is definitely a relationship, and we automatically establish that relationship between the outage and the incident if these things are tied to the same event. Okay. The other thing that we want to also establish is the fact that when an outage goes out on the event side, it's not paying attention as to whether it's planned or unplanned. The only purpose it has in life is that I'm trying to capture that this CI went down and now it's back up. And by us now using automation to reflect that in the service desk side and the asset management side, we're now able to reconcile that with things that were planned either through change management or through maintenance windows to determine whether or not we can calculate through service level management if this was a missed expectation. Okay, so these are the key things that we are introducing or put in place and have been made available with the 3.5 release. So, in short, kind of the summary of things, we've introduced enhancement to one-click validation to allow you to isolate problems not only at the very beginning of the setup and the installation, but also to be able to do it if you're going in steady state. It may be 6 months after the fact that something changed and you want to understand why it's no longer having tickets get created. We've added some additional integration mappings out of the box. There's a mapping that supports particular slots flowing all the way through for assignment. There's also the ability to leverage out the temp fields. Side note for the assignment item, we've actually just updated the documentation to this end, so those who've seen it before may not be aware of this, but in the documentation, what some of the impression was that you had to hard code what the assignment was, and that's not the case. The assignment can be derived. Those who are familiar with TrueSight and the ability to leverage slots, you can put that in the event, derive what the value is, put the variable in there, and then whatever you come up with as the derived value is what would be passed through. So that availability is there. It's not just hard-coded that you have to take an event and for this event hard-coded to a group. You can leverage the robust capabilities of TrueSight to figure out or derive what that value is and that variable is and pass that into the slot for the assignment fields. Incident consolidation, we talked about that. That's more of an efficiency. You have to enable that. Out of the box, it's going to be backwards compatible and disabled, but you have to turn that on to make sure that if you're using multiple policies, things get consolidated. We talked about the ability to tie into other event sources, other event monitoring systems. That's what the service-oriented interface is there. There's full documentation about if you're leveraging a third party or some other event source, how you map things in and how you map to the fields. And like I said, it's been simplified that theoretically all you need is the summary and we will create an incident so you don't have any failures. Now the summary is not going to help you that much, so of course you want to leverage more information. But our point is that we've built resilience around that. As long as you have a summary, we'll create it. If you don't have a summary, that's the condition by which we'll fail. We won't create an incident without you at least telling us what's wrong. Okay? And then we talked about outages, where we are doing the coordination for outages for being reflected in the service desk, automatically establishing relationships, and then we've introduced the ability to support establishing policies so you can determine what scope or what set of CI that you want to apply these outage policies to. Now there's a variety of references that are out there. These are some of the key ones I think that help with this session and this content. And we have the solution level documentation that takes you to the 3.5 set of docs. The support, we talked about mapping outbound fields. This was the case where I said that you need to find the filter that we've documented that allows you to say what fields on this incident ticket will be mapped to the temp fields. If you want information to flow over to the info record on BPPM side, there's complete documentation on what that filter is and how to do it. We also have the community page. Some of the things that we have here more than likely may result in some follow-up questions, and we'll probably leverage either the community page or Greg and the team will facilitate making answers to those available if we hit something that is either out of scope or we find that there's some additional investigation we need to do. There's some supporting material at a high level, data sheets and white papers. You have that information at your disposal. And then these are just 2 videos. We actually have a whole set of videos that will be coming out in the next month that goes into details. Now, if you go back to that one summary slide where I talked about all these different features and then I talked about the net new features, there will be videos for each one of those features. We'll be trying to put them anywhere from a 5 to 15-minute segment that allows you to watch the video and understand the functionality end to end. And so you have not only the documentation, the wiki documentation online, but you'll also have videos for each of the different features. And we already have some videos out there, as you see from here, that talk about the higher level concepts of service resolution. We talked about levels. If you're not familiar with level 1, 2, and 3 and how you would evolve through those levels and what that means, there's video out there that explains how those levels would map to your organization's maturity and how you would evolve in your development. Those videos are already available. But there's a video out here that talks about the things we've covered here and what's new, in case you want to play it back or have some other folks take a look at it. This will be recorded and available for playback as well. And then there's also some details that talk in a bit more depth about the BSR evolution. So if you're still sitting on IBRSD and you're trying to understand and reconcile, at what point it would be a good time to switch over, that would be worthwhile viewing as well. But there's also some concept videos that are available via the communities page. Okay. With that being said, The goal was to hit the mark and try and make sure that I didn't drone on here for more than 45 minutes and leave the balance of the time to have more interactive questions and have people be able to talk to and follow questions with either myself or Jeff to talk about BSR in general, service resolution in general. Greg, I'll hand it back to you.
Great, thank you, Darius. And we do not have any questions in the Q&A pod of the WebEx. And so, Melanie, would you be able to provide instructions for callers to open their lines to ask questions for Darius and Jeff?
Yes, if you'd like to ask a question, you may do so by pressing *1 on your telephone keypad. If you're using a speakerphone, please make sure your mute function is turned off to allow your signal to reach our equipment. A voice prompt on your phone line will indicate when your line is open. Again, that's *1 to signal for a question at this time.
Darius, while we wait for that, question came in about how much is available with Remedy Force integration.
Okay. Yeah, so Remedy Force, we did a first pass at expanding the capability for talking to our SaaS solutions. The more robust solution and bidirectional support is covered in on-demand. For Remedy Force, today, well, Legacy, you were able to create a ticket with Remedy Force, but what would happen is that you would actually get an email back or something back on that solution. So what you would have to submit it via email. What we've done is we've done basically level 1-ish, and let me explain what that means. Level 1 is really all about actually level 1 period. It's whether or not we go level 1.5. But a level 1 is really all about I have an event, and from that event I want to create a ticket. It's all about the event, has nothing to do with the CI, has nothing to do with models, nothing like that. Level 2 is I have an event and I also want to pass in the CI information and leverage the CI information in order to influence how the ticket is routed. That's level 2. Level 3 is when you're trying to deal with models. I have a causal and an impact relationship, and when I create the CI, when I create the event occurs, I want to be able to record in the service desk system both the causal and the impacted incident and the relationship between the two. Now, turns out that for the first iteration of Remedy Force, we are primarily supporting level 1. When there is an event, that event will result in a web services call that will create a ticket in Remedy Force, and you will get back an ID that will be then reflected in the TrueSight system. The larger benefit is that if you're leveraging TrueSight and you have other sources doing things, you can now basically do the level 1 capability of event creation of a ticket in Remedy Force. Where our next consideration and one of the hurdles that we have to overcome is the fact that the CI that we're referencing that is used to integrate with TrueSight is tied specifically to our Atrium CMDB. And because of that, the Atrium CMDB is not what's leveraged by Remedy Force. Remedy Force has a equivalent CMDB that leverages a similar data model for a CMDB, but it is its own CMDB. And therefore, information that goes into that CMDB is different than information that is stored in our Atrium CMDB. TrueSight is integrated with our Atrium CMDB. It's not integrated with the SaaS CMDB that is sitting up in the cloud for Remedy Force. So that's one of the barriers that we run into there, because the CI representation, the CI references are not the same. And so although you may pass the CI up, it's going to be a CI by name that you send over into Remedy Force. But as far as how you route it and what you do there, Remedy Force will just take it as data. But the base level capability is you have an event, you can create a ticket in Remedy Force.
Great, thank you, Darius. Are there any questions, Melanie, on the lines?
We have no questions.
Okay, so if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask, again, *1 to identify yourself for a question, and let me just check the WebEx for any other questions, Darius.
Yeah, so I think I saw in the chat session there's a question with regard to licensing and how many millions of dollars we charge for this. So it turns out that no, this solution is a capability that illustrates the 1 + 1 = 3 or more concept. You've invested in TrueSight. You've invested in incident management for the service desk side. This capability of those two products interacting with each other is a part of the capability. There's no incremental upcharge for intelligent ticketing or for service resolution to be available. If you have, the investment was in the base products, and the fact that those base products are BMC products, this inherently becomes a part of your capability for those two products to interact with each other. There's no upcharge for the service resolution capability of interaction between TrueSight and the incident management system.
Great, thank you, Darius. I have another question around upgrade. So the first part of it is the upgrade from BSR 3.0 easy?
Is the upgrade from BSR 3.0 easy? Okay. From when you say upgrade, I'm assuming that you're saying from upgrade 3.0 to 3.5.
That is correct.
Yes. Okay. So the answer that should be coming through, especially given that this is recorded, is of course it is. Yes, it is. However, what I would also offer, which is always the caveat, is what are the things you need to consider when you're doing this? What are the things you need to take into account when you're moving from 3.0 to 3.5? It is notably different than going from 2.0 or the IBRD architecture into the architecture for the first time. But if you started with the new architecture, the move over to 3.5 should be relatively straightforward. The things that I always say to consider is that if you were on 3.0 and you put in customizations and you go to 3.5, you need to reconcile those customizations. Now, we hope that the number of customizations is significantly less because a lot of the functionality is there. But as an example, with 3.0, the assignment capability was something that you could do it, but you had to leverage the temporary slots that we made available. So you put in some customization to pass the information into the temporary slot 1, 2, and 3, and then you map slots 1, 2, and 3 of the temporary fields into the assignment fields that are required on the incident ticket so that it got the assignment group, company, and location or area, whatever the other third parameter is. So that's a form of a customization, not very exhaustive, but it's a form of customization. Well, in 3.5, we do that for you automatically. So what you would need to do is make sure when you go to 3.5, if you want to leverage that assignment capability, you should deprecate your customization and leverage the predefined slots that we have so that that stuff flows all the way through. In our upgrade, obviously, we don't fix that for you, right? We don't know what your customizations are. So the same caveat I give at every step of the way is you must take the time to reconcile your customizations that you may have put in place. That is more notable when you're going from the IBRSD 2.0, 1.0 into the new platform. That's the notable shift that people have to account for. But when you're going from the platform of 3.0 to 3.5, you're already on the architecture platform, and that's that transition is additive, mostly additive, if not some few bug fixes. Now, let me take a step back and pause for a second. Jeff, is there anything else that comes to mind from your discussions with customers about that experience?
I know that's pretty straightforward, Darius.
Yep. Okay, yeah, so it should be a pretty straightforward process to go there from 3.0 to 3.5.
Thank you, Darius. I have a follow-on to that is what version should I install since I see a few 3.5 versions out there?
Yeah, good point. Let me give the answer, and I'll bore you a little bit with the background. If you're coming into 3.5, the only version you need to install, the only thing you need to put in place, it is a full install for 3.5.01. That's all you need to put in place, 3.5.01. That's it. Now, that's the definitive answer. Now, let me give a little background and clarity where we understand there was some confusion. Right? So please be patient with me on this because I'm going to bore the living daylights out of some people who don't care about this. But for those who are making a decision, this explains why so you feel more confident about the answer that I just gave. There were previous versions out there. There was a 3.5.0, whatever, just a 3.5.0, which is our base release. There was a 3.5.0.001. I get the numbers mixed up, but it's some O's with a dot and another one on the end of it. Right? And then there's the latest release, which is 3.5.01. The reason that we had the 3.5.0, obviously that was our base release, but it was released against a certain set of combinations of products for TrueSight working in conjunction with ITSM. When we came out with the 350.001, which felt like a patch, we found that what people were doing were trying to install the 350 baseline and then trying to reinstall this .0001 on top of that, not realizing that that was a full install as well. It wasn't like a patch. And so you're running into collisions because you're putting the product in place and then trying to install the product on top of itself when it was already there. And so you got back these errors that says, and people got the impression it wasn't working. So what we were looking to do was to deprecate, and we have to go back and confirm this, but you should not find, it should not find a 3500, you should not find a 3501, you should not, 3500.0001. Those should be deprecated off of EPD. The version that is the latest and greatest, which is a full install, is 3501, right? That's the one that allows you to work with the latest version of VPPM in the different threads that they have. They have 9.5 SP2, they have 9.6 SP1, and they have 10.0.1, or if you're looking at the other subcomponent, which is 05. So that version of 3501 works with all of those versions, and we put that in place to make it very clear. There's only one version you need for all those latest versions of the product. The only reason that you would be going back to any consideration is for customers, for previous versions, or for customers who are running on, let's say, for example, ITSM 7604. They're way back there. The only version that will effectively work with that version of ITSM is the 2.0 release of this solution. So that's the only reason you would go back. But when it comes to the 3.5 platform, the primary one you should be working with is 3.5.01. Do not worry about the other versions. You don't have to put something in place and then install this. That is a complete install. And as far as the versions of Remedy, that works with the, and correct me, Jeff, because I don't have the matrix in front of me, but I believe it's from 9.0. Is it also 8.1? I can't remember. For Remedy for 3501?
It's 8.1.
Yeah, so 8.1 all the way up through the latest versions of ITSM, 9.1 SP1.
Thank you, Darius. That answered a few other questions that were asked about versioning. There's one other question about how long would it take to set up the services, assuming Remedy and is already installed. Do you have a ballpark or some kind of timings that you've experienced with other customers?
Yeah, I'll give you two answers, as usual. The two answers that I'll give. One is based upon our ivory tower view of the world, okay? Just so you know. So there's no ambiguity when you see this. If you see it on docs, it's coming from that perspective. And then I'll give you the field experience or the field expectation. The ivory tower is that, look, if you put in the right version of TrueSight and the corresponding supporting version in ITSM, frankly, the installation of this should be measured in hours. The basic capability is there to get it installed, it's up and running. The time that it takes really is spent on configuring the system to support your use cases that you have in mind. Let me give a tangible example. If you go in place and you just do the basic install, the installation is one thing, configuration is another, because of what you want to do. When you do the base install, the product and all the bits are laid down and things are in place. That is something that should be pretty straightforward once you have the base products in place. However, if the customer is starting with, hey, I'm doing just a level 1, then they're going to basically turn on the global policy and say, I want this to apply for all CIs. If there's ever a failure, have that result in an incident. Turning that policy on is not a big deal. You turn that policy on and you should start seeing tickets get created, okay? The flip side of this is that when a customer starts talking about, hey, I want to go to the next level. I want to go to basing it upon models. Well, when you get to that point, then it's a matter of your processes. Do you have models in place defined in the CMDB? Have you put in place the integration that supports the publishing of information from the CMDB into the TrueSight system for CIs for which you have monitors? Okay, in that case, you're now doing a broader process to make sure your environment is set up to get the right data in place. But once you have that in place, the ticket generation piece basically enables a policy. and then you define the scope of what you want that policy to apply to, because you have to determine what CIs you want to take into account when you apply a certain policy. You got to make some decisions there. So from an ivory tower inside behind the firewall where we design, QA, and test it, we're not dealing with those kind of scenarios, which has to do with making decisions about which ones to do, right? So to do the install, pretty straightforward. Configure the system to do a level 1 to say, hey, I created an event on this, now have it show up as an incident. Pretty straightforward. The time that comes into play in order to get your solution where it needs to be, this is now in the field experience, largely has to do with people process. It has to do with understanding and making sure that you have effective models in place. It has to do with deciding the scope for which these policies apply. It has to do with ensuring that although you're publishing CIs from the CMDB, do you in fact have monitors on those CIs such that when a failure occurs, you actually get an incident as you expect. You'd be surprised how times where customers take CIs out of the CMDB, publish them over to TrueSight. Those CIs show up in TrueSight, and then they wonder why they're not getting an incident created, and they have to reconcile the fact that, oh, wait a minute, I realize I don't have a monitor or have something set up or an agent looking at the CI so that when a failure occurs, I will get the incident that I expect. Right? So it's the install is not the problem. Is not where the time is spent. It should not be where the time is spent. In fact, that's one of the major things we try to focus on. I say within hours. Some would say within days, because again, the thing that moves it from hours to days is because you just don't do this in a vacuum, right? This is involving the event management organization and the service desk organization, okay? So where the time comes in is making sure those two organizations are on the same page about what items are going to come from the event management system and show up into the service desk system. Because the service desk system organization is not going to be very receptive to the fact that, hey, when you put this thing in place, every time you get an event, just automatically create an incident. Now they get this firestorm of unreconciled incidents that get created because you didn't enable event consolidation or you didn't enable incident consolidation, right? You want to make sure that when you send it over there, you're passing the right parameters so that it gets routed to the right group. So the time really comes in the field on the people process side to make sure that two organizations now look at the solution holistically and the information that is expected is actually received, and that the events that we want to monitor, the CIs that are critical CIs, actually have the things in place to make sure that they trigger the events that we're looking for. Install, pretty straightforward. Deployment, coordination between groups, that's the thing that moves your needle from hours and days to sometimes weeks and months, because it's the coordination to make sure you get it right. So hopefully that long-winded answer kind of helped folks understand that it's more than just the product install.
Great, thank you, Darius. At this time, I just wanted to check, Melanie, are there any calls that are queued up? Any questions on the call line?
No, we have no questions.
Okay, so we will take another round of questions on the Q&A within WebEx event, or you can hit *1 on your phones to ask a live question. We'll pause for a second. Darius, if there's anything else you'd like to add, I'm sure you will.
Yeah, so we will also have this session. You know, everybody knows that Engage is coming up. It's not that far away for us, at least, and it's coming up there in September. This solution will be available and for people to see it firsthand and be able to ask more interactive questions, or maybe even see how this would work relative to where they are today. So we would encourage folks who are attending the Engage to look for the sessions that are targeted for service resolution, and then follow up there if they have some additional questions.
Great. Darius, I just wanted to circle back around on the demo within the media file that was not able to play. Is that demo something that can be made available?
Well, it's just a screenshot that shows when you press the button what you should expect to see. If I can, you're right. While this is coming up, is there a way for me to show my desktop and then just
absolutely
do that here? Okay.
Yeah, if you could just do a share and then desktop, and you choose all or just your browser. Just wanted to close on that one item.
Okay, share my screen. Monitor 1. Okay, let me know when you can see my screen.
We see a browser.
Okay, here we go. Good. Okay. Are you able to see my screen now to say what's new in 3.501?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's what we should see. Let's go back here. Let's go back here. Okay, so the only thing that the demo was showing was that you have this screen that shows up and you see these different checkpoints. You have check service desk accessibility, check configurations, mid-tier accessibility. These are all things that you see as they're slightly indented. The intent is to say, hey, we're going to go in and make sure that if getting to the service desk, make sure the configuration's in place, make sure the certificates are there, make sure we can access the mid-tier, make sure that the login credentials are correct. It's another failure point that we often have, people take for granted. The only reason it's not working is because they got the password wrong. Somebody changed the password and they didn't realize they had the right password in place. And make sure it's accessible. Once all those check off, then you know that you have access to the service desk. Then check whether or not we can create an incident to make sure that the right forms are in place. We want to make sure that the right outage interface forms are in place. We want to check the service desk to make sure that the operation service desk updates to BPBM. Oh, we want to make sure that when we communicate from the service desk back to the BPBM side, that the right touch points and the interfaces are active and available there. And then the internals that we do on the TrueSight side is check to make sure that the event is communicating with the cell and make sure that the gateway is up and running. See, all of these things are in place, and if you know the architecture inside and out like we do from the design standpoint, yeah, okay, that's great, you wouldn't need this. But we, even as the ones who know this, we leverage this all the time because this just basically isolates where the problem is. And so the key thing is that not only does it check the checkpoints, but it also sends through a sample item through the queue so that it tests whether or not the actual event will result in an incident. It's one thing to say, yes, I've got in the kitchen, I've got a sink. Yep, the sink is there. I've got a garbage disposal. Yes, it's there. I've got a drain. I've got a hot knob, and I've got a cold knob. Well, whether or not the piping is working is not known until you actually turn the water on. So in this case, we send a marble through the pipe and make sure that independent of your policy settings, whether or not all the things result in a flow. So as a result of that, you just do a complete check, and it does the other checks, but also it does some additional validation. It sends end-to-end information over to generate an incident, and the same thing for outage. And then it shows that it was successful and the outage was successful. And if in fact you need to see some details because one of the things above failed, you click on that link that you see there at the bottom, and it will take you to a page that show you that if you had a failure at point X, this is the typical thing that you need to do to resolve it. For example, if you had a failure on certificates, it would say you need to go over to the system and upload these certificates in order to resolve that. And once you've done that, rerun one-click test. We continue to emphasize this for customers to do because we're trying to make customers self-sufficient because it's not, advantageous and it doesn't really expedite the process that when something's failure in this type of solution with all these, different moving parts, that I got to pick up the phone and call customer support. Support's got to come online. They're going to look at asking for logs, and they don't know your environment, et cetera, things like that. We're trying to get customer support to say if somebody calls in around service resolution, ensure the first thing they do is run one-click test. So we apply the philosophy of isolate, and then get logs or get information specifically in the area for where the problem occurs. Well, in this solution, we don't want to come in and say, I don't know what the problem is. Let me just capture logs from everything and throw it over the fence to support, because that's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. So this is what we're trying to put in place. We continue to invest in our ability to do this level of validation so we can isolate problems or confirm that everything should work. Now, one thing I would clarify here, you can actually run through this and have everything work and come up green, and yet you're still not getting the tickets the way you would expect. What that does let you know is that now you can isolate to the point that there's probably something misconfigured in the policy that you put in place. You either don't have a policy including a CI that you expected to, but that moves you out of the integration, out of the plumbing, and now into your configuration to focus on why there may be a problem. So even there, it helps you if, in fact, everything goes through. One-click test says that the pipes that bring water into the sink are all fully functional and you will see water. But if you're doing something from a policy standpoint, or you're doing something where the events are not triggering the way you would expect, you need to take a look inside of TrueSight. Or if, in fact, the tickets are getting created, but they're getting routed to the wrong group, well, you need to go into the incident management and figure out what your rule is and determine why one rule is superseding another to get it to the right, to make sure it gets to the right group. Okay, so this was the screen that we were looking to show in the demo that just came up as a blank screen.
Great. Thank you, Darius. And I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. Melanie, is there anything on the phone lines?
We have none on the phones.
Okay. And so I just wanted to thank everybody for attending this session. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted within a week of this live event. And if you need to contact BMC or support, the information is on the screen right now. And wanted to thank you again for another month's webinar. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Darius.